Good morning and welcome to this morning session where we're going to address the issue of the heat pumps. My name is Vangelis Zimas and I am the head of the Energy Transition Insights for Policy Unit in the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and it is my pleasure to moderate this very important session today. In this session, we will try to answer the urgent question, how do we double the installation rate of heat pumps in Europe? And it is urgent because buildings account for 40% of our energy consumption and 36% of our greenhouse gas emissions. It's also urgent because we need to reduce our use of gas and oil, not only for climate reasons, but for geopolitical reasons as well. The REPowerEU plan has been our response to both of these imperatives and set an ambitious aim to double the current deployment rate of individual heat pumps and add up to 10 million individual units over the next 5 years. And, of course, we are already 1 year into that. To meet this challenge, we have to think about a whole range of issues, touching upon technology, social acceptance, energy poverty, regulation, supply chains, and skills. So we will address many, if not all of them, over the course of the next 90 minutes. The first hour will be a series of presentations, punctuated by opportunities to take part from the floor. We will also be using Slido, so make sure that you have your mobile handy, and the code is here, so please get prepared for this. And the last half an hour is going to be a panel discussion in a hot seat format. That means that you can present your ideas, pose the questions to our panel, and we will discuss on how to improve the deployment of heat pumps, so start thinking about this already now. We will kick off in a moment with the Deputy Director-General of DG Energy, Mechthild Versderfer, who will share with us the latest policy insights in the field of heat pumps. Mechthild has extensive experience in the energy field, and along with a distinguished career in the Commission, she also has been the Director of Sustainability, Technology and Outlooks at the International Energy Agency. Also here with us from DG Energy is Paola Rey Garcia. Paola is the Deputy Head of the Buildings and Products Unit and is currently involved in the development of the Heat Pumps Action Plan. And Paola will join us for the panel discussion. From the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, we have two of my colleagues, Agne Toleikite and Jonathan Volt. Jonathan will join me in moderating, and Agne is going to share with you for the very first time the findings of our brand new heat pump study that we will release immediately after the conference, which looks into the challenges and opportunities for the widespread adoption of heat pumps in the residential sector. After Agnes' presentation, we will hear from leading research organizations in the field. First, Peter Melvig from the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research in Germany will give us insights into heat pump readiness in policy instruments. And Sam Oxenar from the Regulatory Assistance Project will present a RAP's heat pump toolkit, outlining the measures needed to make the large-scale rollout of heat pumps a reality. Last but not least, we have Thomas Novak, the Secretary-General of the European Heat Pump Association. Thomas has been an energetic driving force for the promotion of heat pumps in Europe, and thank you, Thomas, for joining us for the panel. But first, it's my great pleasure to welcome Deputy Director-General of DG Energy, Mechthild Versderfer. So, Mechthild, the floor is yours. Maybe you can take it from there if you wish.
Thank you very much, Evangelos, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at that session about heat pumps. I think we can ask and start, maybe I'm not Slido, but I can ask the question, how many people in the room do have heat pumps at home? Very good. I think if I ask the question again in 5 years, I hope to get more hands up here in the room, including myself. It's a struggle in Brussels, but that's another story. It's not for today. So what we could see after last year's crisis, and I already mentioned it's an unprecedented crisis from an energy point of view. We have never seen what happened after the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. we have seen big concerns on security of supply, and we have seen a lot of price spikes, in particular last August. The Commission has reacted with what we call REPowerEU, energy efficiency first, diversification away from Russian gas, and speeding up of the clean energy transition. And that includes high targets for renewables. We just adopted the 42.5% binding target for 2030. We have the 11.7% target for energy efficiency by 2030. And in our REPowerEU, we also speak about the acceleration of heat pumps. I think we need all those measures to decrease our dependency on fossil fuel, and in particular, first of all, from Russia, but more generally, we need to decrease our consumption of fossil fuel, and we need really to accelerate all measures of clean energy together with our member states. So with REPowerEU, I think we have made together a huge step forward. We had a winter which went relatively well without blackouts at least. And we have also managed, Thomas can give the figures on acceleration of heat pumps in a lot of our EU member states, but also solar, wind, and other energy sources. So in that sense, I think when today's work is mainly, or topic of the day, energy efficiency, and Paula Rey is here to reply more in detail, I think it's a top priority for the Commission, everything we can do, more structural changes in energy efficiency, but also combine energy efficiency and renewables so that we can really profit from that clean energy transition, be more secure in Europe, but also do more for our climate, but also more for our jobs and competitiveness in Europe. I think we try to combine these together. When we look where we need to start, I think there is one sector which hasn't done enough. That's the building sector. As we know, buildings are consuming 40% of energy and approximately 30% of the EU gas consumption. So there is still 1/3 of heatings out of gas in average in our EU member states. In some member states it's higher, in some member states it's lower because of their energy mix. But overall, I think we need to tackle the issues of emission, of gas consumption in our buildings. And when we look at what are the tools, I think the switch from fossil fuel to renewable energy is unavoidable in order to achieve our decarbonisation goal of 2030, but also to become carbon neutral by 2050. In that sense, we have three main tools from our regulatory framework. There's much more what's happening at regional, national level, but I will only outline very briefly our three main tools. We have presented in December 21 the recast of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. We have also presented the revision of eco-design minimum energy efficiency requirement and of energy labels for heating appliances. And my last point will then be, we are right now working on a heat pump action plan. When it comes to the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, these allows for precise action through implementation. It's the first time we have been proposing minimum energy performance standards. So this is something we are now negotiating between Parliament and European and Council, Energy Council. So we have proposed minimum energy performance standards for buildings and energy performance certificate. We believe that we need further electrification and energy efficiency, but in order to do that, we also need the financial resources. And there are other sessions today who look deeper in these financial resources, be it via the Cohesion Fund, the Reconstruction and Recovery and Resilience facilities, the new Climate Social Fund, and others, which are AFIC, which has a lot of experience. Secondly, apart from EPBD, is the eco-design and energy labeling, which allows EU-wide action on space heater front. And I think among experts, this is very much known, but maybe for non-experts, this is not enough known. We think the single market is the best tool available to ensure that larger heat pump volumes correspond to lower prices. But for now, the space heater market is still very fragmented, often national. We believe that eco-design and energy labeling measures, which are right now under preparation, should give the signal for scaling up heat pumps, resulting in larger volumes and gradually more attractive prices. For space heaters, the energy label is being right now reviewed in order to clearly show the fact that standalone boilers are inefficient. And then, as I said, we are right now working on a heat pump action plan, which should be published by the end of the year, and that allows to follow up progress and take action where needed. So we will look at different areas. As I mentioned in the beginning, the REPower initiative is targeting buildings by aiming the rollout of 30 million heat pumps by 2030 and already 10 million by 27. We will hear if this is realistic or maybe too low. In the study also, which GRC is publishing today, I understand. We are working on that heat pump action plan around 4 axes: better collaboration between the different stakeholders, including the research community. I think this is important as well. We are working on communication and skills, which means basically raising awareness. There are a lot in some of the member states. One I know best is really bad communication sometimes around this topic. And then we look at the legislative work, which I already presented, and more accessible financing. So we really strongly believe that the building sector needs and is a key factor for the European Green Deal. We need to increase energy efficiency of buildings, but also replacing fossil heating system. Both are needed and go hand in hand. In that sense, I would like to thank you for your attention right now and very much looking to the debate managed and chaired by our colleague. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mehthild, for these inspiring words and clearly pave a bright future for the heat pumps. You see, we have a full room here, and I agree with you that in a few years, when we have another version to look back, we will see many more hands being raised. Now, we have a very busy schedule, so allow me to go to the first thematic presentation. So I would like to pass the floor to my colleague, Agne, who is going to share with you the highlights of the JRC report. So.
Good morning, everyone, from my side. So I'm going to present our heat pump study, which is going to be published by the end of this week. So in this report, we are looking into the path to phase out individual fossil fuel boilers in residential sector. So I will be looking at the different reference buildings and see what are the performance by changing to heat pumps. Also looking at the whole building sector and what does it mean to replace 30 million fossil-based boilers by heat pumps. The study covers different topics. We also look at the effects on the power system. This is the modeling quantitative approach. Also, impact on financially vulnerable households. We have a section on competitiveness of European heat pump industry. And finally, we analyze and represent potential barriers and bottlenecks. So first of all, I would like to speak about the building decarbonization pathways. Here the figure shows the final energy consumption for space heating in buildings. So we see that in 2019, more than 60% of the space heating demand was covered by fossil fuels. And here to 2030 and 2050, the bars represents various organizations, results of various organizations, which look what does it mean for the building sector if we want to reach the Fit for 55 targets. Where does it go? So we see that by 2030, we have to reduce the fossil fuels. And when it comes to the role of heat pumps, here the ambient heat as a final energy consumption source is increasing. And looking at the long-term scenarios to 2050, we see that ambient heat is emerging as a main energy source supplying space heating. So now, looking at specifically at the member states, and here's the figure showing the current status of the share of fossil fuels on the total space heating in EU member states in 2020. And we see that there are still few member states fully relying on fossil fuels. When it comes to gas consumption alone, there are 5 member states which has more than 50% of the heating consumption covered by gas. And now switching to the heat pump market. So heat pumps sales have grown in the last decade. Based on the Heat Pump Association's data, we saw that from 2011 to 2020, heat pumps market sales grow on average by 11%. And we see that in 2022, the sales boomed. And in this year alone, 3 million heat pumps were sold, and 90% in the building sector. However, if we look at the market share, we see that there are differences between the member states, and in some countries, the heat pump represents a very low share of the heat supply, accepted by some by Scandinavian countries. So now to a little bit about our methodology approach. So to really analyze the performance indicators from going to individual gas boilers to heat pumps, we analyzed approximately 600 residential buildings across Europe using some available data sources. Here, the Tabula database, also the HotMap projects database. And using this data, we analyze the current and future energy trends. So using our in-house bottom-up building stock model, we used calculation based on some European standards. And finally, to calculate the impact of power system, we used another model, which is called METIS, that was done by our colleagues. So speaking about buildings and how suitable are heat pumps for different buildings. So first of all, the efficiency of heat pumps is influenced by temperature of the heat source, which is ambient heat. Ambient, in case of air, water is just the temperature outside. And floor temperature of the delivered heat. So if you consider a building with a gas infrastructure, it's just a floor temperature in the radiators. So these general buildings with gas and oil boilers typically have maximal floor temperature level ranging from 55 to 90 Celsius, and this parameter is important when it comes to the efficiency of heat pump. And based on that, the building might decide or what can be a cost optimal efficiency of a heat pump, and depending on different parameters, an existing building might decide whether it's okay or whether the building might improve thermal insulation in building envelope or upgrade radiators or individual units with larger one, perform hydronic balancing. In our analysis, we try to understand the building sector, and especially this with gas and oil boilers, how well they are suitable for a heat pump. This is a very simplified approach because we use the data, we calculate their energy need for space heating, and there is no direct link with energy specific energy need for space heating and efficiency in boiler, but indirectly we can see that approximately 40% of all building stuff with gas and oil boilers consume less than 150 megawatt hours per square meter, and they can be considered as you can consider that the heat pump can work optimally in those houses. However, the rest, which is 60%, these buildings might consider an energy efficiency improvement before applying like an air water, if we speak about a traditional air water heat pump. And we see that the red area, that approximately 10% of these existing buildings with gas and oil boilers are located in worse performing buildings. A little bit to present some performance, some indicators, just to compare the efficiency between a heat pump and a gas boiler. And here is it indicated two residential buildings, like one located in Austria, one in Italy, and we see the yellow part is the specific energy demand by using a gas boiler, and then the green part, what happens if we change to a gas boiler to a heat pump, and we see the first building in Austria can reduce 60% of the energy demand, yearly energy demand for space heating, and the house in Italy can reduce 70% in this case. Then it comes to economics of these investments. Here's the figure showing the annualized cost, which includes the investment cost and total savings over the lifetime of heat pumps, which is approximately 16 years, and annualized. So, and the first bar, the blue first bar indicates with the prices from 2021, and the darker blue indicates with the prices from 2023. And here we see a big impact on the electricity and gas prices on these investments. So the positive value shows the additional cost, and the negative values the savings. So we know that in 2023 the electricity and gas ratio were lower. So in 2023, if we consider that as a constant prices, even with considering the high upfront cost of the whole lifetime, the heat pump can be cost-effective investment. So when we now we look at this, so we modeled what does it mean, the 30 million heat pumps by 2030 for the whole residential building sector. And here we made some assumptions. We assumed that in this specific calculation, we assumed that all these 30 million heat pumps would replace individual gas and oil boilers. We also assumed that 60% of these changes would be combined with some of building envelope improvements, and these heat pumps are proportionally allocated among the member states. So the highest number of switch boilers would be in Italy, Germany, followed by France, Estonia, and the Netherlands. So results, so replacing 1/3 of existing gas and oil boilers would lead to a reduction of 36% of gas and oil consumption in those buildings. And we can save 59 megatons of CO2 emissions, which corresponds to a reduction of 28%. What does it mean of the power grid? These figures illustrate in the blue area the total electricity demand in Europe by 2030, which was results from another model primes, and the green area is the electricity from heat pumps. So on the annual, when we speak about the annual values, the heat pump electricity demand will constitute 5% of the total demand. In winter, it's 11%. The heat pumps will have a larger influence on the annual peak hourly demands. Our colleagues who analyzed this, they see that there is only a moderate impact in terms of generation mix and power prices of these changes. However, they don't take into account the local grid, the impact of the local grid. And demand response flexibility strategies can alleviate a considerable proportion of the stress. Pooling heat pumps can have also a very high impact. To conclude my presentation, so replacing fossil fuel boilers with heat pumps not only offers significant climate benefits, but it constitutes to improve the energy security of the European Union. The climate benefits are higher than the grids have larger shares of renewables. So heat pumps reduce monthly heating costs in most cases. There are still barriers in several countries that the electricity and gas ratio is high. It's bad when it exceeds 3. So we see that the heat pumps have been most popular in new buildings. However, they are also suitable for existing buildings. And it's very important for these existing buildings to define the right size and efficiency measures, a right combination. Sometimes the buildings does not need to implement a deep renovation. Sometimes it's maybe enough just to replace some radiators. But it's very important that the homeowners are well informed about these efficiency measures with combining a heat pump. When it comes to vulnerable households, so there is a need for targeted financial support schemes, which target this as household specifically. And a barrier is a high upfront cost, especially combined with building renovation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Agne. As we said, the report will be released in the course of the week, so in the next 1 or 2 days. I would like now to pass to Jonathan. Jonathan, you have the first Slido survey. And actually, let's see the code again, because I did not have the time to introduce it myself.
All right. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Vangelis. And you see the Slido code and on the screens. And I will ask everyone, I have 3 questions now in the first session, and I will ask everyone to please answer as fast as possible, so we have as much time as possible for the panel discussion later. The facilitators, could we move on to the first question? All right. And the first question is kind of a warm-up. How would you describe the last year's heat pump development in emojis? So use this smiley function and please go ahead. I will try not to interpret results too much, but maybe Thomas, this is for you to comment on later. It looks like many people are. Somebody's here from the maybe commenting on that. But it seems to be working. You all seem to understand how the Slido works. So let's move on to the next question, which is maybe of a more serious art.
Actually, the message is that we have to do more, and this is a very good impetus to continue with our work.
Indeed, yeah. Okay, how would you rate the projection of 30 million hydronic heat pumps by 2030 in terms of ambition?
Okay.
So we're still receiving results. I will wait a couple more seconds. But it seems to be a broad consensus. It's at least somewhat ambitious. And yeah, then I think we can move on to the last question for this first Slido part. Would you consider your home to be low temperature ready? And I'm, for a reason, not defining what this means. It's up to you too.
We need a lot of renovation. Deep or shallow, we have to renovate.
For sure, but it seems like most people have an understanding or idea at least what it means. But I'm still sure you will learn more in the next presentation that we have on this topic. But I leave it back to you, Vangelis.
Oh, thank you very much, Jonathan. It was a very nice break to the presentations. And actually, now I'm looking forward to the second slide or set of questions you are going to have. But first, we are going to hear from Peter about the heat pump readiness in policy instruments. Peter, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Evangelos. I mean, it's really great that you voted already about low temperature readiness, and now I can explain what it means. Now, of course, you have an idea. We have been dealing with low temperature readiness in the last 2 years. We had several studies. One will be released, I think, in the coming days together with REP. And we also started another project just this month. So yes, it seems to be a very active topic at the moment. And Agne also already said, yes, we have this paradigm shift in heating in general. So if we want to get rid of gas and oil, and I think we have to halve the share of gas and oil in the next 10 years, we need heat pumps. And this is, I think we have a bit of biomass and a bit of hybrid heating maybe and district heating, but the large share shall be heat pumps. And of course, not only in new buildings, but to a large share in existing buildings. Yes, I apologize. I have to take you a bit into heating technology. But I mean, yes, you have an idea what the flow temperature exactly is. So yes, it's the warm part of the heating circuit. So the temperature that the heat generator has to provide. This is the critical temperature. This is a critical point. And as Agnes said, it usually ranges between 55 and 90 degrees. If you have floor heating systems, of course, it's lower. But in the past, some people said heat pumps should only work with floor heating, and that's not true. They can operate at higher temperatures. But why is this flow temperature important for heat pumps? We have a very direct connection between the flow temperature and the heat pump efficiency. And in this picture, we see the temperature rising from right to left, from left to right, sorry. So the higher the temperature gets, the more the efficiency of the heat pump will drop. And these are real buildings and real heat pumps. It's a study from Fraunhofer. And we clearly see this trend. And you cannot deny this. And I mean, low efficiency is one thing, but this, of course, leads to higher energy bills. And, of course, in cold winter days, this leads to a higher load on the electricity grid. Yeah, what can we do? What are the fields of action to address the flow temperature? These are mainly two fields. The one is the heat loss of the building. This is influenced by insulation and air tightness and everything. And on the other hand, it's the heating system itself, so the size of the radiators or the type of radiators. And ideally, the flow temperature is exactly at that point where the heat from the radiators is exact the loss the building has. But this would require correct settings of the control system, and this is not what you usually find. I think many control systems are still in the default settings, from the start. So the idea behind that is you usually have this. This is a timeline. We start with a red box. This is where many buildings operate, for instance, with 70 degrees. And your boiler has a certain lifespan, and when it comes to an end, then you wake up and say, I cannot install a heat pump because I'm running at 70 degrees. So the idea is prepare the building in time while the old boiler is still running. And we have to get people to prepare their buildings, and maybe through changing some radiators, maybe through insulation measures, and prepare them to a certain point. And this is what we call low temperature readiness. So it's just a standard to make it easier to communicate. In this slide, it's 55 degrees, but this is only valid for Germany. For other countries, this may vary completely. And yes, once you have reached the standard, you're prepared, you can install the heat pump when the old boiler breaks down. And after the heat pump is there, you should not stay in this state. It's not the aim to keep 55 degrees. They are not optimal. They're just the entrance. But if we want to get climate neutral, we have to do more insulation to the building, and then the flow temperature can drop and the efficiency can rise in the future. Yes, and as I said, we thought it's a good idea to not always say, prepare your building with this and that flow temperature, but give it a standard, give it a name, and the name is low temperature ready or LT ready, because that's easier to communicate and it's easier to put in political instruments. And yes, how to find this temperature is not that easy. In Germany, we thought 55 is fine. Why not higher? And we can say if we go higher, if we would go to 60 degrees, then we would the heating cost would extend the cost of fossil fuels, for instance. So the efficiency would drop that low. And why not lower? Of course, heat pumps run better with lower temperatures, but we see it as a door opener. So you could say the worst temperature that is still feasible, and not to exclude too many buildings. Yes, and now we come to the policy instruments. So far, this was just the introduction. But yes, in general, political instruments are information, legal regulations, and funding schemes. And which of them to implement in one country, of course, depends on what is there in the country. But if we dive a bit deeper, in information instruments, of course, first thing is public information, campaigns, maybe raising awareness for this topic in general. The other thing could be add information to inspections, to audits. This all can be just bringing this topic to the people, and it does not necessarily have to be one threshold temperature. It can also be in this color bar, and decide, okay, in this temperature the heat pump will run at a reasonable efficiency. Another thing of including it information are building renovation passports. So maybe first just include it in the EPC, in the Energy Performance Certificate. There you have the recommendations, and you can recommend prepare your building for heat pumps. But BRPs are much more advanced than this, because BRPs, they outline a strategy for the building. So not just the next step of renovation, but the path to the target. And if in this path there is maybe somewhere a heat pump, then you can say, okay, prepare your building in time for that heat pump. So you really make a plan. And I may deliver a small preview of our current project. This is IB Road to EPC, which is not a complete renovation passport, but takes elements from the building renovation passport to the EPC. So this is and there we want to implement this low temperature readiness as well. And of course, another instrument for information would be digital building logbooks. There, I think it would be really interesting to have LT readiness in a logbook, because this you can use for municipal heat planning, for low temperature heating, district heating. So coming to legal regulations, there are already a few where it's implemented. It's not called low temperature readiness, but it's in the same sense. So in building codes for new buildings, on the other hand, I said new buildings, it's not really a problem, but in UK, there is this obligation to keep the temperatures below 55 degrees. You can have it as a standard for existing buildings. During a renovation, there's an obligation in the Netherlands to not exceed 50 degrees. A standard for new heating systems. So when you change the boiler, then look at the flow temperature. On the other hand, this is the point where you have already lost maybe. So once you install the new boiler, you should have been prepared for that. Also, mandatory inspections. This is something we did in Germany last year as a reaction to the Ukraine war, where chimney sweeps look if your system is running at correct temperatures, and it should be just optimized for certain buildings, not for all. And one thing where you could include it in regulations is also the maps. We still don't know what maps will look like, but this could be, a low temperature readiness could lead to a later fulfillment of maps. So you could say, I don't have to be in class E, even though my building should, but I'm already low temperature ready. So you could accept this as a partial fulfillment maybe. Yes, and of course in funding schemes, I think there are two ways in general to include this. One would be as a precondition, so you will only get the funding if your building reaches LT readiness. But of course, the threat is that you raise unnecessary barriers to funding schemes, and that's not what you want. But the other thing would be to have a dedicated funding scheme for LT readiness. And that's, I think, always a good thing. And still, LT readiness is in the EPBD recast already. It's not called LT readiness, but we see it in the settings for the maps. The readiness to operate at low temperatures is one of the key points there. It's also in the recommendations of the EPC. It's mentioned, operate at low temperatures. And also for the inspections, it's mentioned that low temperatures should be watched in the inspections. So many fields of action to include this topic, and some are already there, but I think this can be more strict and more elaborate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Very interesting. Jonathan, are we ready for the second set of questions of Slido?
Yes, indeed. I almost think we need like a jingle or something when it's time for Slido questions. So please take up your phones and follow the same procedure. And can we already now move to the next one? All right, so what should be the main focus areas of the EU Heat Pump Action Plan? And you have a long list here. You can also write other and write your suggestions later in the question and answer feed. And I should tell you, I see we already receive a lot of questions, but for those who don't know, you can use Slido and you can post your questions or recommendations through there, and also give thumbs up to the questions others have posted and you find interesting. All right, I see answers still coming in, so let's wait until we have closer to 50.
So a portfolio of issues, as we have already
Yeah.
discussed. So
There's a lot of things to cover, apparently.
okay.
Okay, now it seems like most people have answered. So I think we can move to the next and final slide of questions for this session. And this one comes with an open answer, so you can type your answer, but please keep it short because we will see this as a word cloud, and if you write something long, I'm not sure what it will look like. But the question is, how can we ensure that the heat pump wave is accessible and affordable for low-income households? Again, it seems financial incentives leads the race. I will give this a bit more time because I know it takes a bit longer to type something.
Very interesting, but of course, all the answers are around pretty much the same solution.
Yeah, it seems there's a lot of good ideas but somewhat consensus around the financial issues need to be dealt with. I'm sure this will be discussed further, maybe in the panel discussion after the next and final presentation. All right. With
Super.
that, I close the slide session.
Oh, thank you very much, Jonathan. And I would like to continue with the last presentation that we have in our agenda today, where Sam is going to present to us the RAP's heat pump toolkit. So, Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Very nice to be here. So my name is Sam Oxenaar. I'm with the Regulatory Assistance Project. We're a global nonprofit that advises governments and regulators in the energy transition. And now, Peter, if I could have from you the remote. Thanks a lot. So I would like to shortly present today our heat pump toolkit for global deployment of heat pumps. I think I can be quite short on why we've done this, because the previous presentations already really focused on this. So we see it as a globally strategically important technology. Even though we support all clean heat technologies, we see that in a lot of the net zero scenarios, a large share is reserved for heat pumps. And with this toolkit, we really try to take a global approach. So we see that there is a lot of lessons that can be learned from countries, especially in Europe, that have been using heat pumps for much longer already, and we would like to share these insights globally. Because we really need rapid progress if we are to achieve our deployment goals. So we have given the toolkit the shape of a sort of loosely based on that of a Greek temple. It's really about not advising single measures, but really a whole package of measures that countries can implement to really that lead to a really sustainable heat pump market. And it's all based on a really strong foundation of coordination and communication. And then we have 3 pillars, one around economics and market instruments, one on financial support, and one on regulation. And this really comes from the lessons we have learned from several of the front-runner countries that have already had strong heat pump markets for years now, or even decades. And there we've seen that coordination and communication have been a huge part, especially in the initial phases of driving heat pump deployment. So making sure that households, but also businesses and especially installers are really included in awareness raising and engagement programs, and also to really include civil society in your plans. So maybe to give some examples, Sweden launched a procurement campaign already in the early 90s, which led to a doubling of heat pump sales. And then if we see at the type of things they did, we see that 50% of their budget was actually spent on communications. So that's really a significant part in these early stages to get people used to this technology that they might be unaware of. And often we see we need to drive the societal acceptance. People are just wary of things they don't know yet. So communication and engagement is a really strong part in that. I will not go through all the examples, so at the end I will give you a link, so then you're happy to explore these examples by yourself in the toolkit. So really the first pillar of the toolkit is economics and markets instruments. And really the base here is to make sure that the economics are in favor of clean heat. And there are several ways or tools to do this. On the one hand, it's environment and carbon taxes. On the other hand, it's general taxes and levies on energy. And finally, I can't read the last one. Obligations and portfolio standards. To give you one example of this, really important is rebalancing fossil fuel and electricity levies. So for us, the goal is to really ensure that over the lifetime of a heating system, clean heating systems are cheaper than fossil fuel-based heating systems. And there, of course, a large part is the initial investment, but operational costs also form a huge part of that. And rebalancing fossil fuel and electricity prices, and especially the way they are taxed, is very important in that. And so if we look at the majority, I don't know if it's visible, but if you look at the majority of the countries, the blue bar is how electricity is taxed, and the yellow bar is how heavily gas is taxed. And then we see that in the far majority, or basically every EU country, electricity is taxed much more heavily than gas. And so this is something we need to rebalance to really make it worthwhile to operate a heat pump. Also financially, because it is already, of course, there will already be savings just by the fact that you're on average 3 times more efficient when using a heat pump compared to a gas boiler. But if you don't see that in your energy bill, then I think it will be a very hard sell. And some of the ways you can do this is, for example, in Denmark, they decided to almost take away tax on electricity used for heating. So there's now a very low tax on electricity used for heating above a certain kilowatt-hour threshold. But another option would be, for example, in the Netherlands, where they rebalanced and moved some of the taxes from electricity to gas. And there's different ways to do this. I think overall our preference would be to rebalance it, so taking away taxes from electricity and putting it on fossil fuels. So then the second part of making the economics of clean heat work is getting them installed in the first place. And installing a heat pump for the first time usually brings some extra costs. Maybe you need to make some radiator changes. Maybe you need an electrical upgrade. Maybe you need a boiler, because in many countries you do not have that yet. And then maybe there's also some works involved, and then after someone drilled a hole in your wall to put in the new electricity cable, you need to make it look pretty again. So these are all some extra costs that you have when you switch for the first time to a heat pump, but you won't have, of course, at the second replacement cycle. And here it's very important that financial support is available, whether it's in the form of grants, subsidies, loans, or also heat as a service. And then a key element in that that I wanted to highlight is that we really use the financial support that we are giving now already in the right way. So luckily, many countries are ending subsidies for fossil fuel boilers, but still 11 EU countries are supporting fossil fuel boilers. And that's really something that has to end, and we have to shift that money towards grant funding for heat pumps. Especially also from an equity perspective. So grants are really a key tool here. We already know that if we move taxes, for example, taxes are usually regressive on energy, so we need to try and find a way to alleviate that pressure, that extra pressure that we will be putting on vulnerable and low-income households. And so any good package should really include specific targeted grant support for vulnerable households. And luckily, if we look at countries in Europe, that 9 of the countries also already have higher subsidies, for example, of 70% or more for many vulnerable or low-income households. But it's not enough to just increase the size of the grant, because there's many more barriers that low-income and vulnerable households face to the installation of heat pumps. For example, it's already around how is the grant made available? Is it through tax deductions, or do you only get the amount a year later? This is already something that will be a huge barrier for people that can't afford the upfront costs. And it's also really about giving a sense of security and certainty. So if you are in a situation where your finances are very difficult, then you will likely have a lot of stress about money, and it will be difficult to make a choice where you don't really know how that's going to affect your monthly rates, for example. So you really need to find a way to give certainty to these groups that, yes, if you install a heat pump, this will actually also be good for your monthly payments, and there's not going to be any surprises. So these are just some of the ways that other barriers should be addressed to make these grants more equitable. And sadly, for now, we found only one country that was looking into more of these other barriers, except just giving higher grant levels. And then for the final pillar on regulation, there's several elements that we think are of big importance. So on the one hand, it's building standards. On the other hand, it's also phase-out policies, obligations on, for example, how many heat pumps to deploy when, or reaching a specific share of renewable energy by a specific date. So I won't go through all of the different proposals that are there, but one that I would like to highlight is national phase-out policies. So we know that the replacement cycle of a heating system is 10 years or more. So that means if we want to be climate neutral by 2050, we really need to start in time with getting rid of the existing fossil fuel boilers. And so a national phase-out policy is a great way to do that and to ensure that we reach the targets in time. And for now, so some countries are already working on this. So the Netherlands, most notably as of 2026, will move to only hybrid electric gas heat pumps. And of course, Germany has been working on it, but I think I already need to update this slide after all the recent developments. So yes, it is a politically contentious topic, but it is very important if we want to make sure we reach our targets. And then maybe a new tool I would want to highlight that we now have in our toolbox is that of clean heat standards, which is basically putting a quantitative obligation on energy companies or heating appliance manufacturers to either install a specific number of clean heat appliances per year or to reach a specific share of greenhouse gas emission reductions or a specific share of renewable energy used. So it's a quantitative standard that can help you reach your target. And this is something that's a bit more advanced already in the US and being implemented there, but we think also has a lot of potential here in Europe. So there's not enough time to really go deep into how this would work, but if you are interested in this topic, please do check out our website, and we have a new paper out on this. So maybe to summarize, the lessons from our heat pump toolkit on building a sustainable heat pump market. First of all, it's really, we need packages of policies, and we also need stable and predictable support. Then it's really about combining economics, financial support, and regulation. But at the same time, we also really need to try and get this speed. So we have ambitious targets on deployment, And coordination and communication is really a key part of that, making sure we get everyone on board and also build the supply chain, build the ecosystem of installers to really make it easy for people to get a heat pump. Then equity, so we really need to prioritize low-income households and really make sure that the grant programs that are available are also targeted to low-income households. And finally, there are novel policy solutions that can also help accelerate this change. So thanks a lot. This was just a brief overview of some lessons from our policy toolkit. If you are interested, we try to make it very accessible. It's in non-technical language. We also included some nice short explaining videos. So if you want to use the toolkit, feel free to share it with a wider audience and explain to them the importance of heat pumps. It's available on our website, and feel free to reach out to me for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Very interesting, and actually it is a good follow-up from the slide that we had that we identified the need to get the right financial instruments to make it happen. So at this point, I would like to thank all the speakers for sharing with us very interesting and insightful research. And before we proceed, I would like to draw your attention to the opportunity for engagement. So I have seen already in my phone that there are many comments, but please start popping even more questions to our panelists. And with that said, first of all, I would like to welcome again our two panelists here, Paola Rey Garcia from DG Energy and Thomas Novak from the European Heat Pumps Association, who are now going to join with the rest of our speakers. And before we turn to the question from the audience, I would like to have a question for you, Paola and Thomas. And Paola, let me start with you, because DG Energy is developing the Heat Pumps Action Plan with the aim to accelerate the deployment of heat pumps in Europe. We're also currently experiencing a really hot heat pump market. So do we really need this action plan?
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. And thanks also to colleagues in the GRC for working together with ENER very closely on the preparation of the action plan. So in fact, we have many reasons that we have identified ourselves that justify and really make the case very clear for the need for an action plan. But I will try to, let's say, distill the main ones, not to be super long. So I think previous speakers also referred to the push over recent years for bigger numbers of heat pumps. Also the push from REPower, which we think is also having an effect. But our analysis that this is not really evenly distributed. We see that it's been quite active in some member states, but still too few. So we really need to make sure that this happens across all member states. We see that there is a much easier case in new buildings. And if we look at the challenge ahead, we really need to target existing buildings, existing systems as well, and the replacement, and at a much bigger scale. And there were interesting figures in the previous presentations. We also need to move away from the easy cases and really spread across many different building types that are still a challenge. And more generally, we also would like, I mean, of course, buildings are a key focus of the action plan, but we also want to tackle deployment in industry, deployment in heating networks, both the small ones, but also the larger ones. So these are a number of reasons why we think that the action plan is needed. A second set of reasons is the need, and that was mentioned as well, for bringing everybody on board. We really need to communicate very clearly and much better, and with messages also adapted to the different member states on this area, because this is a challenge that will not be a one-off. It really needs to be accompanied up to 2030 and beyond. And that requires very clear communication to bring people on board, but also to bring installers on board, workers on board. So it needs to be very well communicated, and also with a focus on skills as well. which is another element that we see very important in the action plan. And then as a, let's say, main other area of reasons, I would mention affordability. So again, it's a bit bringing everybody on board. And for that, of course, there is an element of financing that is very clear and well accepted. And we have already good instruments coming up or in place, like recovery plans and REPower. They really have a focus on heat pump deployment together with building renovation. We also have the Social Climate Fund that will also have a very big focus on these areas, and in particular vulnerable consumers. But we also need to make clear that legislation will play a key role. And in particular, I would highlight what we are preparing on eco-design. It was also mentioned by Method in the introduction. That is key, really. Benefit from the internal market, scale up, make it more affordable, reduce barriers across member states. That will really make the difference. If the prices don't go down, there will not be sufficient public money. So we really need to benefit from the tools that we have and to give a very, very clear signal to the market on the new standard to come, which needs to be heat pumps, often together with other solutions in the transition as part of hybrid solutions, for instance, but clearly with a very clear push for heat pumps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paola. Very clear. So everybody now is looking forward to reading the action plan. But Thomas, the European Heat Pump Association represents the main heat pump manufacturers in Europe. So why do you see the need for this heat pump action plan as an accelerator? Why we don't just leave it to the market forces?
Yeah, we could. If we had a strong CO2 emission price, and we would accept that this price could actually exceed 100 euros per ton or even more, then you could say, let the market work. Unfortunately, we don't have such a strong CO2 emission price. It's only planned to be introduced in 2027 across Europe. And I doubt that policymakers will accept that the price goes to the level that is needed to meaningfully shift the market. And so we have to work with carrots and sticks. And we are seeing that the markets are developing really well. So I could really open by saying, thanks to all of you, heat pump friends and heat pumps colleagues in the different research institutes, REP, EFOY, JRC. We have met really many years ago when I came to Patton and explained why heat pumps should be used more. I've also explained that to many people in the Commission, and I'm super happy that this is now picked up. I also see colleagues from district heating in the room. We often hear that this is a problem, but no, it's not. It's complementary. And we count 3 million heat pumps in the market, so there is a big dynamics. We don't really know how big the heating market is because data seems to be a bit scarcer than we have it for heat pumps. But we can say that we are at 25, maybe 27% of annual sales. So there is going to be a situation in which people will ask themselves, why is everybody buying a heat pump and I'm not? So I think there's coming some social pressure. Why do we still need a heat pump action plan? Because as Paula said, the distribution, it's distributed unevenly. The top markets, the top 3 markets, France, Italy and Germany are representing 43% of sales. The top 10 markets are representing 89% of sales. So we really have a left steep distribution of sales, and we are running a little bit in a risk of having an east-west divide. A lot of the heat pumps are installed here today in Western European countries. Eastern Europe has become the manufacturing hub. We see immense investments, up to 5 billion are announced until 2025, and the biggest gigafactories. We have talked about gigafactories in batteries when Elon Musk started that. Now we have gigafactories in heat pumps, factories that can do 300,000 units per year. I really want to see the loading bay of that company, that factory. 1,500 boxes roll out of the factory and have to be distributed to Europe, but that's coming. And still, now we need to install them. And as you have said, we cannot do everything with government funding. So my concluding statement will really be, we have to look at the economics. The economics needs to make the clean heating the one that is most affordable, that is most economically attractive for everybody. We are running a campaign called Heat Right on that. because we think it should be a right for clean heating to every end consumer. And where the end consumer cannot finance that, then, and I was the one that wrote 100% grants, the French have done it, a poor household in a 20% lowest income percentile should receive full funding for that, so that we do not stop the energy transition in heating by the affordability of the technology. And for everybody else that can afford the technology, then the energy ratio, the price ratio between electricity and gas needs to be corrected to a level around 2, because around 2 gives you about 50% savings in your annual heating costs. And then I have talked to so many people, anecdotal evidence has it, people do not mind to invest 10,000 more over a gas boiler, because they realize that they can save over the course of their lifetime. And I can cite my father, he's 84 years old. We have discussed a heat pump in that house. He's absolutely aware that he will not outlive that product, but he's not willing to pay more. So when the installer came and said, we can do it, it's possible, small renovation, some more radiators, then this house would have been 55-degree ready, but you will pay more for the heating cost. Then he said no. And so, in my opinion, everything that is in the heat pump action plan is well and good, but we need to address it to member states that it's unacceptable that we have an electricity price ratio of 3, 4, sometimes even 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Very clear. So now, as I said, I would like to open the floor, and we are receiving comments. I see here on my phone on the Slido a number of questions. So, Jonathan, should I go through the list? And I see here that there is one question that has attracted also a lot of support from other colleagues. And allow me to read. Some heat pump suppliers are offering heat as a service, charging a monthly fee covered by the energy cost savings. Is this a solution to make heat pumps affordable? And I think that, Sam, you also mentioned that heat as a service in your presentation. Of course, the question is open to all, but Sam, would you like to take it first? And then I will ask other members of the panel to take that point.
Sure. We think heat as a service can be a great solution. And I think in more and more countries, we see companies slowly starting to offer this or starting to offer pilots on this. Then still, of course, the important part is, okay, how do we ensure that the buildings are prepared for that, especially if it's about affordability. That means many lower income households will live in a building that might not be already suitable to fit directly with the heat as a service plan. So then the question is, how do we relate, does the provider of the heat as a service include maybe a connection with a one-stop shop, or include some services on, okay, how do we also help you with ensuring that we can fit it in your home, if we get that right, then it can also really work for lower income households. But overall, I think it has a lot of potential.
Thomas?
I would agree insofar as it is a bit of a rhetorical question, right? It's, of course, it makes it more affordable, because you don't have to eat upfront costs of 25,000, 30,000 euros. Let me just say that also very clearly. Sometimes in the press you find numbers like, oh, I have to invest 160,000, otherwise I cannot have a heat pump. That's complete crap. And you should really ask who is paying you for this statement. The heat pump replacement today, depending on the country, depending on the brand, is in a 5-digit area, but it's more around 30,000 than anything higher than that. Does this help? Yes, it does. And to make the discussion a little bit of a discussion, I would also contradict Sam a little bit. I think it's not a big problem what the building does, because these services need to take that into consideration. It only makes sense if the offering also looks at the building core and ideally even offers a fixed rate. If you have looked at the news, the Vargas Holding, the makers of Northvolt, they have now announced a new offering for heat pumps, and I think quite a few people need to look at their own calculations, because this will disrupt the market quite a bit, as they have done it for batteries. And they say 80 euros per month. I haven't seen the precise details now, but that was the press release. And if it's 80 euros per month, then it's my interest as provider of that offering to look at the house, and I will of course pluck the low-hanging fruit first, but then I will also go into renovation action with better access to finance, with better access to technical capacity. And again here, the electricity price ratio will be super decisive, because if you can save as the provider of heat as a service, you will do that.
Very good. Anyone else would like to take that, Paula?
Yes, thank you very much. So no, just to complement, I think also this gas price ratio that is currently in the hands of the member states, because it's basically a decision on how to tax different fuels and to make it really align with the decarbonization goals, so that electricity is not treated in an unaffordable way. So this will really have an impact on the business models to emerge. So I really think that the two come together, and that if we have then a ratio that is more favorable to heat pumps, or that at least it doesn't treat them unfavorably, let's put it that way, that then there will be more business models like this one, and innovative financing emerging as well, and much more of a market emerging.
Oh, very good. So solutions are coming up. So this is very constructive. Anyone else would like to take the floor, or I can go to the next question? Let me see. Do I have the same things here? Isn't that a risk that the concept of low temperature ready building will be used as an excuse for the worst performing buildings to keep their old boiler? Peter?
Yes, definitely is. And that is why we said, okay, we must not put the threshold temperature too low in order not to exclude buildings. On what we always say, if a building is not low temperature ready, it doesn't mean you must not install a heat pump. So it's more like a recommendation to say, prepare your building. But if the building is still running at 60 degrees, and your boiler breaks down, the old one breaks down, please install the heat pump despite this. But keep in mind to lower the temperature in time to make your heat pump run efficiently. And on the other hand, of course, we have a number of buildings. We saw them, the worst performing buildings, and I wouldn't recommend installing a heat pump there, especially if it's monumental shelter or something. But the good thing is that many of these old buildings are in historical city centers, and there you wouldn't have heat pumps anyway. This is more a case for district heating. But yes, I think the core of this question is how to put the threshold temperature for heat pump readiness, and not to allow this excuse.
Thomas?
Very quick. I fully agree. Not every building is ready for a heat pump. If you have a building that is not low temperature ready and you do not want to do anything in upgrading it, then you're running the risk that you have a very, very costly building at your hands, because a low performing building will be a cost burden in the future. That must be clear. So don't install the heat pump, use all the excuses that you want, and then pay for it.
Sam?
Yeah, maybe I think this is also really why it's so crucial to implement a package of policies. For example, in the Netherlands, they have put in place a national home insulation standard. It's not really a low temperature standard, but they say the goal is to make homes ready for clean heat, irrespective of whether there will be a heat pump or a district heating system or another type of heating system. And at least for the post-war homes, they will say if you renovate to the standard, then we are sure that you can operate the heating system on low temperatures. And with additional changes to the heating system, also older buildings could be made low flow ready. But the standard is then combined with the efficiency regulation on heating systems, which says that, okay, by 2026, if you want to change your boiler, you have to move to at least a gas-electric hybrid. So that also preempts using a low-flow readiness standard as an excuse to keep your oil boiler, because there's other regulations on the side that will also push you towards changing your boiler. And I think in the Netherlands already, just the announcement of this standard has led to a huge increase in demand for heat pumps. And then, of course, you have the legal backstop kicking in at a certain point in time.
Thank you very much. Let me proceed because I see that we have many questions and we will try to cover as many as possible. Of course, we have almost 6-7 minutes left. The next question is, how do the emissions related to refrigerants in heat pumps compare to emissions from traditional gas boilers? I have heard that before, but you are the experts, so somebody would like to take it, Thomas?
I'm so happy that we can talk about refrigerants. It's really great stuff. Without the refrigerants, the heat pumps wouldn't work. So imagine we wouldn't have refrigerants, we wouldn't have any heat pumps. Refrigerants and heat pumps and gas boilers, if you take a very rough measure, and you can take a method that was developed in the United States called TEWI, Total Equivalent Warming Impact, then you see that any heat pump today with the current electricity mix is saving about 50% of emissions over a random gas boiler. This will change, and the majority of emissions comes from the energy carrier that you use. So it's either gas or oil or electricity. So now we are all looking at decarbonizing electricity. The Euroelectric Power Summit is taking place. They have announced that by 2030, average emission of electricity is around 100 kilograms per kilowatt hour today. According to European Environmental Agency, it's 265. Maybe a surprise for quite a few people because the emissions from electricity have gone really down and gas is around 200 grams per kilowatt hour. So the faster we decarbonize electricity, the lower the emissions, and then kicks in the question, what about the refrigerant? Because the refrigerant itself, if it leaks, has global warming potential. And hence, what I would say today is we have to push for every heat pump that we can install over every gas boiler. So today, every heat pump counts. In the future, and this is not a very long distance future, 5-10 years, with decarbonization of electricity, we have to address the refrigerant question much more. But luckily, we have the F-gas regulation, which is very ambitious on that. Industry is suffering from it a bit, I may say, and we hope for a positive outcome. But this will be done in the next 4 weeks, hopefully, and then we have clarity, and then this problem will disappear.
Thank you very much, Thomas. We have 4 minutes left, but I really want to take the next question because this is very important. It's about strategies to ensure the accessibility and adoption of heat pumps among low-income households. We discussed that in the first question when we saw heat as a service. The Commission and we as a society, we are committed. No one is left behind. And it is not just a motto. I mean, we do that for the society and we have to take care of the people who have difficulties to pay. So the heat pump should be is a solution. It's not something that is going to split our society even more. So we really need to focus on this area. So very quickly, what else can we explore? Paula.
Yes, no, thank you. So I think here there are two elements of the action plan that are quite important. One is really the partnership idea that also Matthew mentioned, which is one of the pillars of the action plan that we are considering, because we need actions at EU level, member state level, but we also need to bring industry and private investors in, also to think about these new business models and new financing tools that could be really tailor-made also for the most vulnerable. We'll also have a focus on financing and on technical support because we really see a need for capacity building technical assistance, in particular to low-income households. And there are some EU funds, I mentioned currently REPower and recovery plans, then relatively soon the Social Climate Fund, but we also need to consider, okay, what else do we need? Because we need to accompany this process up to 2030. We need to inform the next Commission and the next multi-annual financial framework in this regard as well, and make sure that there is a particular focus on vulnerable citizens. And then another element that we see is quite important is, as mentioned, in the member states' hands, the gas price ratio is important for cost effectiveness at all levels, including the most vulnerable. And then we also see that, again, eco-design, we believe that it will make a difference because it can, across the board, bring prices down. And that will also make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paola. We have 1 minute left, so I know that there are many more questions, so we could continue this discussion for longer, which for me demonstrates the appetite that we have and our eagerness to make sure that the heat pump initiative is going to fly. So I would like to wrap up here our session, and I would like to express my gratitude to the audience for the active participation, so many comments that I see here on Slido. Also a big thank you to our speakers, our panelists, and to all the colleagues that helped to organize this session. The insights shared today have highlighted the immense potential that heat pumps can offer as a sustainable heating and cooling solution. And we also discussed about ways to intensify and optimize the heat pump deployment in Europe. We, the European Commission, we will continue working on the heat pumps, and I hope that we can continue with all of you this discussion also in other forums in the days, weeks, and the months to come. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.